We missed you, Brooke.
Okay,
We missed you.
I forgot to
All right.
now.
It was
Good
cold.
evening, everyone. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. It is 6 o'clock. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Linda's oncology PA is Julie, your friend, your wife's friend.
Oh, yeah,
All right, if I could have a motion to approve the agenda for the budget meeting of March 6, 2023.
Eric and Jim.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Open forum. We have the 30-minute open forum is the time the board sets aside to hear in-person comments from the public. The comments may also be emailed in advance of the meeting prior to 4 p.m. on the date of the meeting, and state in the email if you would like your correspondence read out loud to Daphne Pearson, District Clerk, at pearsond@greenvillecsd.org. This is an opportunity for residents to voice general concerns or compliments, especially about items on the agenda. However, this is not the time to register complaints about specific individuals or about items that should be addressed confidentially through the proper channels. All comments shall be addressed to the district clerk and shall be limited to not more than 5 minutes per board policy 2180. Please note that members of the board may not be able to directly respond to citizens' concerns or comments during public open forum. Is there anyone that would like to speak during open forum? Do we have any emails?
We do not.
Okay, then with that, I'm going to turn it over for the presentation for the capital component, the administration component, and the revenue component of the 23-24 budget. Thank you. Mike?
So, Janet, would you like to start us off?
Sure.
Okay, so tonight we're going to go over the capital budget, the administrative component. We're going to review the preliminary budget, go over revenue, and then our dates. Last week we went over the program component of the budget. So we'll have Rich start off with the capital component.
Good evening. First, we'll go over the equipment plan. What I'd like to purchase this year is a batwing finish mower. The mower we have now is about 10 years old. The batwing mower is a 12-foot mower deck that is towed behind a New Holland tractor that we have. It does about 60% of our mowing. It's used to mow the soccer fields and the other areas around the horse arena and stuff like that. The other purchase is a rug shampooer. This is a compact, low-profile carpet extractor. It is made to be able to get into congested and hard-to-reach areas. It also comes with a stainless steel floor tool with a wand to get into other areas that we can't get into with the shampooer itself.
Excuse me, Rich.
Yes.
I'm sorry, quick question about so the batwing mower is to replace the current mower, is that right?
It's a mower, it's actually a mower deck. It's a 12-foot mower deck that goes behind the New Holland mower, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's, to replace that one.
Okay, and it's 10 years old, but does it still work, or is it?
It still works, but we're putting a lot of money into it and replacing a lot of stuff on it now. So it's time to start to change it over.
Okay.
So, is there any other questions on the equipment? Yes.
As long as he asks a question about, how much money would you estimate you have to put in it to keep it running another year?
I can't really tell you the exact amount of money that would be put into it. I can look into and see. The mechanics down to the bus garage do a lot of the work for us, so we buy a lot of parts and stuff like that. They do a lot of the work.
I'm sure that the blades underneath the mower are pretty shot.
Yeah, we have 2 or 3 sets of those, so we switch them out. But it's the mechanical part on top that's starting to get worn out. The motors, not the motors, they're drive shafts on the top of the mower. They get worn out. The equipment budget is down 48.35% this year. The contractual expenses, we have a $34,000 increase. This is for the telephone and electric budget codes because they're going up on us. The contractual expenses is up $7,030, and it's up 0.95%. We have a decrease of $26,977, which is due to the purchasing of the safety, health, and management services to Questar. For supplies, we have a $5,000 decrease in safety and health supplies. This is because we raised it up before because we're buying masks in terms of that, or thermometers.
Rich, can you go
stuff
back
like
one
that.
slide?
One slide?
Oh, no, oh, I'm sorry, okay, go ahead, Rich, my fault.
Okay. BOCE services, this is an increase due to switching vendors for safety and health management services. We are going to switch from Needham Risk Management to Questar 3 BOCEs. Questar can do all of the safety, health, and management things that Needham Group did for us. And they will have a person on campus 1 day a week all year round. So we will have somebody from them to be here to keep an eye on everything for us. So that'll work out nice. We also will get aid on other things that I have to hire out, like checking our backflow preventers, inspecting the fire extinguishers, inspecting the kitchen Ansel system, and the fire alarm inspection. And with all that, we will get 63.5% back on state aid the following year. So that's $39,202, which is 100% into our budget. So the final budget is up $17,879, which is 2.5%. Is there any questions on that slide?
Rich, just so I understand, so we're not going to be using Needham then for the safety services, is that correct?
Correct. We're going to switch to Questar 3 BOCEs.
So is there another line item that is going to be decreasing, or was Needham?
Zero.
Because, yeah, Needham
That's-
wouldn't be in both these services.
That's part of the contractual expenses. You see how he said that
The 20
telephone and electric is going up $34,000? The difference between that and the $7,000, that's all the costs of the Needham coming out. So there's a $26,977 that we are removing from the contractual line that used to be Needham's.
Right, but right now it just shows an increase of 7,000, so.
Right. So it increased by $34,000 because of electric, but then it decreased by $26,000 because we're taking Needham out. They're both purchase services,
Okay,
so then that equals the $7,000 increase because of electric and telephone.
got it. And then with Needham, is that aidable?
Needham was not aidable at all.
Okay, all right.
And I just,
And we are getting more service from Questar, hours, by the hours. Questar will be here 8 hours a week, 52 weeks out of the year. So we're getting more hours of time for the same amount of money. And then next year we get BOCES aid.
Okay, on top of that. And so this would be the first year that we would be making this change?
Yes,
Okay. Are there other schools doing it?
yes. Caro just did it last year.
Okay. And are they happy with it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So right now, Questar allows us to join their safety meetings
Mm-hmm.
right now, and they helped us lots with the COVID and the testing with COVID. Questar helped us a lot with that. We weren't paying for it, but they were still helping us. So now they're gonna help us even more. You got any other questions for Rich?
Jen, I just have one more question about, does that include all the right to know stuff? That-
Yes.
Everything that need them,
Yes,
they're out.
yes.
So is this service, I'm assuming that this service also does all the record keeping
Yes,
for all the staff? Okay.
yes.
Needham's taking a big hit.
I don't think it's turning on. Let's get turned on. You hear me? What do we do with the excess or the equipment that we're replacing? Like say for instance, it's just this one case, this mower, but other types of equipment that we're replacing, what do we do with that equipment? Do we sell it on a marketplace or?
We trade it in.
Okay.
We trade it in sometimes, or we will sell it on, we use Auctions International.
Okay.
That's where we sell a lot of the school's
Surplus.
surplus, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So the next slide shows some other items that are in the capital component. We have the judgment of claims and refund of property tax. There are no changes there. Mike?
Yeah, so also as part of the capital component budget is our school resource officer and having Dustin here. So that comes out of this line item as well. There's a slight increase, a 2% change, which is pretty typical with the services of the school resource officer. So that will looking to continue that for next year. Our next slide, we've talked a little bit about the dust collector. I'd say a little bit, maybe a lot of it. But we had, like I said, we've had a great meeting with Rich, SEI, Jim, and their engineer to talk about the dust collector. So one of the things that we're taking a look at doing is, because of the delay in the bids, one of the things that we know already is that the bids came back initially high. We removed some of the cost and some of the work out of the initial working with the contractors, removed some of the work that was to be done, and we were going to have our folks do it through. So one of the things that we're looking to do is, you know, we need to kind of walk that balance of, you know, what the next iteration of the dust collector is going to look like. So in order to do that, what we're looking to do is to have a little bit of money there available to us if we need to. Originally we had $295,000. We're looking now to go to $125,000 if we need to. Whatever we don't use out of this money, if we do not use it for the dust collector, we can put it back into the general fund. But having the contractors do it and not Rich and those folks, his folks do it, is that it becomes aidable. And as long as it stays within that, under the contracts, we can receive aid in the following year out on that. As if we were having Rich do it and we were spending the money for the fencing or the concrete or some of those things that we had talked about, we will get no aid on any of that, and we still would have to purchase those things. So this is kind of more of a opportunity for us to stay safe with that project. So and hopefully we'll hear soon on from that meeting that we had last week.
Is that the same percentage, April, 61%?
Yeah, I believe that's still
Yes.
around our number. Yep.
Mike, I have a question on that.
Okay.
And Tracy and Janet probably can chip in on this too. We voted on a certain amount, dollar amount, to fund this project. So it's only a process question, not a numbers question. We need to re-vote for a change or amend what we voted on.
Once the budget gets approved by the voters, then this $125,000 will tell the state that we're increasing our budget for the dust collector.
Oh, okay, so we're gonna,
As a
the
board,
amount we voted on, was it-
420.
Right.
we're adding 125
Yes.
to it? Okay,
Yeah.
that's a different question.
Okay, this slide shows the principal and interest of the existing loans that the school has. And we get 71.2% aid back on this. So the next piece is the administrative budget. There are many aspects to the administrative budget. It includes the salaries for the professional staff who spend 50% or more of their time in administration and supervision, clerical staff related to those positions, central printing, curriculum development, research, planning, and evaluation, central data processing for tax collection, and BOCE services. With the administrative component, we had various contractual expenses that have increased and decreased. For the contractual line, we have an increase in the district insurance, the superintendent conferences, grant writer. We used to use Questar for grant writer, but we're finding that we can hire outright for cheaper. So we're moving that from a Questar code to a purchase services code. Compliance services, auditing services, school association dues, and in-service training. We do have a decrease in, so some of the health and safety that Needham did was also in business, in the administrative part, not just in the capital part. So we have a decrease for health and safety services. And that's about $8,500 out of the contractual one. For materials and supplies, we've increased the postage line. We are planning on doing an annual school calendar, a paper calendar that shows the events for the whole next school year. Sierra will be working on the calendar, but we have to pay for the postage and the printing of it. We also have a decrease in BOCES services. Daphne tried the election management system and she wasn't really too happy with it, so.
Oh, I liked it.
You liked
Just I can't justify the cost.
So we elected not to continue with that service.
And Janet, how much was the service, do you know, or Daphne?
$19,921.
Okay, thank you.
I guess you knew the answer to that real quick.
I have my
Yeah,
little
right
cheat sheets here.
You know the boom.
I got the cheat sheet. We are also digitizing our files, the student records from 1930s on, board docs, documents that from the 1930s on. That's in process of being done right now. This summer we want to do the CSE because it's cheaper to scan all these documents and have people have access to the computer than it is to build a building for storage. We are running out of room because we're required to keep student records since the beginning, CSE records, board documents, and we are running out of room. So this year, they started digitizing our documents, and so we'll have an annual cost for that to get into the program. So I think there's 4 people that have access to the program.
So for the CSC, how is it different from, let's say, Frontline, which is what's used to manage kind of existing students? This would be separate?
Yes.
Okay.
And a lot of this is going back before we got Frontline. We can use that now moving forward, but it's going back and putting all this stuff on.
Yeah, they keep the records for a very long time. Because sometimes with Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, they need some kind of records from years ago.
Okay, that makes sense.
So we have that all in storage, and there's just no more room.
Where is the storage right now?
Some is in the elementary school, some's in high school, some is in the district office.
To what degree are we gonna free up space? Enough for a classroom?
What's that?
Enough for a classroom, for example, at Ellis?
No,
No?
no, I mean, in the DO, it's in the basement.
Okay.
In the high school, it's up, it's not access for another classroom. It's just that we don't have room to put more stuff in there.
Oh, I understand, I was just.
In the elementary school, it's in the basement, and there's just, it's hard to find things.
You'd be surprised at how we've utilized space, or the district has utilized space through the years. Some of these spots where we're currently using in storage, you almost have to send 2 people in because you're afraid somebody's gonna get lost out in some of these spaces. It is dungeon-esque.
Are we paying for someone to actually do this? Okay.
Cap and BOCES.
Yeah, we
Let's do it.
approved that a couple years ago to start that process, didn't we?
I think it was in the talks. It was never put into the budget.
It was, so we're just starting it this upcoming
We started
budget?
it this past school year because we used some year-end funds from last year
Okay.
to do
That's
the bulk,
probably when we talked about it.
probably.
Okay. All right.
But there's a $10,000 annual cost to having the software and to retrieve the information. Slide 12.
All right, so these are some of the updates that we have for district insurance. Increase in umbrella insurances, changes to our Questar and BOCES codes to actual. One of the things that we looked at initially was what were those costs, kind of guesstimates, and kind of writing them in regards to what they're actual going to be. Taking a look at some of the things that we've proposed removal for from the last meeting, things such as the bowling, fitness center supervisor, working with Scott a little bit in some of the reduced computer support that he uses, some of the different softwares and things like that. We had initially put back in the assistant musical director. We had paid for that through grants over the last year or 2, and we were hoping to put that back into the budget. So we moved that from the initial ask. The other thing that we took a look at is at Ellis, some additional aid support, not around special education, but it was more along the lines of taking 2 hours of a TA here or there to provide additional support in classrooms. Again, not special education connected, so removing that aspect of it. And then some of the bus parts that were initially asked for. One of the things that Janet and Mary, taking a look at with where we're currently spending some money or not spending money, is there the ability to buy some of those things this year? So it's not like we're not purchasing these things. We are, it's just using some of the monies that we were able to use that we didn't spend this year that we thought we'd be spending. So we're buying some of those parts now through this year's monies. Any questions around that?
So by doing the expense now, they'll sit on the shelf as inventory?
Correct.
Correct.
You know, like filters.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks, Mike. I have a couple questions.
Okay.
Just starting from the beginning, the budget that was proposed, excuse me, the last meeting, that was the 126. Is that right?
Yes, I believe that was the number.
What was the tax levy corresponding to that?
3.10.
That was 3.10?
Yep.
I thought I remembered that it was above. Okay, I saw
Well,
it now.
the tax cap was at 3.10, and we still would have had to cut things from that budget amount. We still had to cut money from that budget amount. Then, in this past week, we did some of these cuts, and then I found $160,000 in state aid revenue, so the revenue increase, which then you don't have to cut expenditures.
Right.
So, and then we got that number further down.
Right, I'm just confused though, because the 34,469, that budget, is that a 3.1% tax levy increase or above it? I'm confused when you say it's above the tax cap.
It was above the tax cap,
And the tax cap was 3.1 though?
yes.
So I'm just curious to know what that percentage was, like as a starting point for cuts. At the 34,469, what was that tax? I mean, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but if that was above the tax cap and the cap was 3.1%, then that 34,469 budget must have been above 3.1%.
Yes, it was.
And what was that percentage?
How much higher, is the question, how much higher
Right,
is that than the
3.2,
For the revenue part,
If I recall,
It was up over.
if I recall, it was 289,000 that they had to cut to get to 3.1.
that is correct. Thank you.
Okay, and so it was 289 that you had to cut to get to 3.1.
Yes,
You found 160 in state aid. So
Yes.
there's still more just of cuts that you had to do to get to
yes.
even 3.1. Okay.
Well, then we also, so the story with the capital outlay and the tax cap,
We reduced that number quite a bit.
we reduced the capital outlay from $230,000, that was included in that 34,469. We reduced the tax cap, the capital outlay from 230,000 to 125,000. Capital outlay affects tax cap. So I redid the tax cap because I had to change the capital outlay, and then it made the tax cap down to 2.51%. Because I reduced capital outlay from 230,000 to 125,000.
I see. So now, by changing the capital outlay, you actually changed the tax cap.
Correct.
Right. So that answers a different question, because I thought in coming out of the last meeting, what we talked about was, look at the cuts like you presented, but understanding how we can land somewhere between 3.1 and 2.5. We might want to be somewhere in between, but look down to 2.5. But what I saw in the presentation is I'll take to 2.5, and I take it that's because that's what our new tax cap is.
Correct.
So we have to get this.
Well, we could go below 2.51.
Or we could go above if we want to request a supermajority.
Yeah.
I understand. I'm not suggesting that. So, okay. One more question here. If I remember correctly, the assistant musical director cost was $836, right?
Yes.
So, to me, that seems negligible in the context of the budget and tax levy. So, is the SIP worth the pour? Because I think it's really, again, minimal impact on the budget, but I assume it's a big impact for the musical.
What we could do with, what we did this year with the musical director is we took it out of enrichment funds, out of the ARP grant, which we still have next year. So we could do the same thing next year and then try to get it into the general fund budget next year, the following year.
Right, so basically what it comes down to is we can still fund it for this upcoming year using it the way we've done it the last year or two. Next year's a new year, and we can take a look at trying to get it back into the budget at that point as well.
I guess
24, 25.
my personal opinion is, again, it's a pretty negligible impact to the budget, but I think it's probably a much bigger impact to the musical itself. So I would be in favor of that. I don't know what the rest of the board thinks. And not to zero in on a particular detail here, but.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be, you know, as we get through this portion of the presentation, some conversations that we need to have is in regards to, you know, if we're keeping something else is going. So it's a matter of, you know, putting some thought and some conversation. You know, the Board of Education is the folks who are, you know, putting your seal on this. So those are the types of information we'll need to go back. We have our cabinet meeting tomorrow afternoon, and a big part of that cabinet meeting will be the discussion around what the Board of Education has come up with in regards to what they want to settle on for that tax cap. And, you know, we have, again, Janet has put together a sheet for you to show you what it means if we go lower, and that 1/10 to 1%, what does those numbers look like? So we'll use that information in the discussion that the board has tonight in regards to where we want to go. So, you know, I appreciate the fact that, you know, you want to potentially keep that spot in the budget. So if the board decides that that's something that they want to continue to keep, we'll take that back to the cabinet and take a look at, you know, where else are we going to, can we potentially find some of that money. So, thank you. It's good to know.
If I could just,
Before moving off the topic, what I thought I heard you say was that the musical assistant director position would still be in next year because you're going to just continue with the grant. It's not like that job is going away right now. It's just coming out of a different pocket to be paid.
Correct.
Okay. And it would make sense in the future when the pocket's available to get it into the general budget. Okay.
Jan, one question, about the 160,000 that, you were able to find, or you mentioned that became available. Could you explain that a little bit?
So I
There
was,
was two parts to it, right?
Yes.
100,000 and 60,000.
so when the governor put out their state run, on the bottom of the state run, it said, high-intensity tutoring set aside for $100,000. So I was being cautious, because I don't know if the state was going to make that, all right, if you're gonna take the $100,000 here in revenue, that means you have to spend that $100,000 on high-intensity tutoring. So I wasn't gonna show it anywhere, because I was afraid that the state wouldn't pay us if we didn't do it. So I took that out of the revenue. The other $60,000, so I had a Questar meeting last week, and they says, no, you're safe putting it in there, keep it, put the $100,000 in there, you're safe, they won't take it away. You have to only show on a piece of paper, on one of the, on the ST3, how you're gonna how you spent it, and they won't take it away even if you don't spend the whole $100,000. I'm like, you sure? I wasn't really
Regardless if you use.
right. They said, no. There was like 5 other districts that said, no, go ahead, it's all right. So I put the 100 back in. The $60,000 is when you have a student that is under state custody or homeless. They take money out of your foundation aid to pay for that student in those areas. But and then, which I only found out last week, when we stack them, we get aid from a different direction. So they take it away from foundation aid, but they give it to you in a different direction. And I did not know that we were going to get it from another direction, because then I know that we have homeless and we have state custody child.
So we have expenses in that line item.
I don't have to put expenses in the line item. I just thought that they're gonna just take that foundation aid away from me, or away from the district, and then you don't get it anymore.
You're talking like a typical accountant.
Boy, yes, I know,
You know what
away
I
from
mean?
me, yeah, I got it too.
So, and then all of a sudden I saw this tuition money coming in from the state, and I'm like, oh, look at this. They're giving it to us, but from a, I don't know, I guess a different pot of money from
Yeah,
the state
yeah.
than,
Very good, thank you.
Thank you for asking.
Any more over there?
Thank you for asking. Yeah, I was gonna ask if you
No, I
could
mean,
go find
were
any
you
more.
speaking with Harry? Did, you know Harry over
yes,
there?
I know Harry.
Did he?
No, he wasn't at that
Okay,
meeting,
okay.
no.
Cause he knows numbers like crazy.
Other comments or thoughts? Questions? Okay, keep going.
Keep going, okay. So this is our revenue. Most of our revenue is state aid and tax levy. So the state aid is approximately 41% of our budget, and the taxes are 53% of our budget, and the difference is from local revenue. We do have a couple of pilots that we're collecting from. The next one is state aid. Now this is what came from the governor's office. But if you look at the next page, the first column, those are, so we have a lot of expense-driven aids, which is the building aid, the BOCES aid, textbook, software, library, hardware, transportation. Those are based off of what we spend this year, and then we get the aid next year with different formulas. So the state proposal for BOCES aid came in humongously high. Now I have a feeling it came in that high because we are using some of our federal money to purchase Questar services, and you cannot double dip. You cannot claim those expenses that you pay to Questar with federal money, and I have a feeling that the state must have not looked at that part. So that's why I came lower with the revenue of BOCES. The building aid,
Right, Janet?
Yeah.
Quick question about that. Do you mean you're conservative because you're concerned that the state might reconsider what it did and come back and
they
adjust the
will.
number? They will.
They will.
Okay.
Because at the end of this school year, I have to tell them how much money we paid out of federal money for Questar services, and they don't know it yet. I know what we're paying out of federal grants for Questar services, so that's why the number is a lot less.
Okay, thanks.
So Janet, just to clarify, it's the BOCES number, 1,146,482 is the lower number?
No, my number's 975. The next,
Next-
look at the next slide,
Okay,
and then you see BOCES, $975,000.
okay, all right.
Okay.
So we are using the lower number to build the budget?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bill-
And you also had a footnote that you were doing with transportation, the reverse.
Same thing, transportation, they came at 1.6 million.
Yep.
And I'm coming in at 1.4 million. Building aid, they came in a little bit lower than our number. So I go based off of this slide here. This is what I built the budget off of for state aid, this $14.1 million. And this slide shows you the history of our state aid. And this is the tax cap, which we already discussed. If we keep our levy at the same as the tax cap, so last year our tax levy was 2.25. If we keep it at 2.51, it's only 0.26 increase from last year.
And what we are allowed by the state is 3.10.
2.51 based on what we're doing now.
Okay.
Because of that capital outlay, from the $230,000 down to the $125,000.
Okay.
And that changes the formula.
Correct.
Approximately how much of the budget increase this year do you think is driven by inflation? Or is that too hard to really put a finger on?
I think anecdotally, I would say that it has had an increase. It has an effect on where we're at.
Yeah, like supplies, that
Yeah,
went
we go
stuff
line by
high.
line. I'm sure we could probably figure out what it looks like, but.
I mean, I'm not asking you to do that
Thank you.
exercise. Sure, except I'm sure inflation is impacting it. I just
Yes.
don't have a good sense throughout the budget how much of the items are more or less sensitive to it. I didn't know if you did, but that answer is good enough. Thanks.
And this slide shows our local.
May I?
Yep, sorry.
I'm not sure exactly why he asked that question, whether it was just. But the point is, from my perspective, the fact that if we come in at 2.51 or even a little lower, compared to 2.25, I think we have to make in our presentation, we have to make the fact that with inflation and how bad it was this year, we're coming in at less than 0.5% increase, really right around 0.25% increase right now, 26.26. Just a hair over 0.25% increase, and I think that in an inflation year to go, with all the impact of all the costs that fuel, electricity, just those two alone probably drove us up tens of thousands, multiple tens of thousands of dollars right there. So I think that's a point that we ought to make in our budget. When we're making the presentation, we ought to make a fact that it's so minimal an increase when you compare to what the overall inflation increase has been.
Jen, this district normally has a excess in funds at the end of the year. We basically fund a lot of the
Like the PA system.
we sometimes do that, right? But we also slide money into the reserve.
Yes.
Does this budget reflect an average amount that we would have left over, or do you have a dollar amount yet? And I know it's March.
We left the, so the top two numbers, the 490 and the 381, we left them the same as last year.
Okay.
At the next board meeting, I am going to ask to put $500,000 into the capital reserve. At the next board meeting.
We're gonna have that left?
We can put, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
And with that being said, the capital reserve, because I remember on the capital project that the voters just approved, our portion is gonna be funded out of that, right?
That's true, yes.
And we're still good
That's,
with that?
that's the 2.6 million
Um,
for that capital project, yeah.
My only concern tonight, and I don't expect an answer, but this budget for next year is challenging. I'm wondering about the 24, 25. It looks like it's not gonna get easier. And I know you'll be on a beach somewhere.
No,
But the
I'll be
rest of us won't be.
babysitting.
Yeah, but we'll be here.
Well, next year you won't have capital outlay. So that'll help you.
Yeah,
Um,
the increase will take care of that. I mean, normal increase will
Yeah.
wipe out any benefit from. All right.
Okay.
So, like we talked about, preliminary budget, and we want to make sure that we can get to, we need to have some conversation around where do we go from here. We've begun some of that conversation already. As we move forward, we want to make sure that we are in a position that we are feeling comfortable about our budget and where we want to make some changes. We worked from our last budget meeting just last week to tonight to kind of get us into a position where we're getting closer. We are not there yet. We still have $68,000, $69,000 that we have to work through with our group to stay at that 2.51%. There have been a couple of questions in regards to, what does, these tenths of a percent or a percent mean? To take a look at, Janet went through and printed off a document for everyone to see what the dollar amount is when we start to talk about some of those things. This is the time where we want to really take a look at where do we want to get to, and what do we want to consider. We have our cabinet meeting tomorrow afternoon, in which we'll take back some of the suggestions and conversations around tonight's meeting to get to where we want to get to, whether it's a tax levy, whether it's specific items that we want to talk to. In kind of regards to what was talked about earlier, the revenue budget is an increase of 1.59%, and the appropriations budget is an increase of 1.8%. So, we're trying to keep mindful of taxpayers' money and how we're spending it, and trying to keep that as low as we can. But we have some decisions, the board has some decisions tonight to talk about. We have some time to present again next week on some of the things that we can do to get the budget where we want it to get to. So we've had one conversation, a little bit of conversation around assistant musical director. There was a couple of questions that came across after last meeting in regards to what are the costs of some different things. One of the questions that came up was, we're looking at retirements, and we look at retirements last year and this year in regards to where do we want to get to. Do we need to replace every retirement that comes across? And so we understand that with some of our COVID funds, some of the monies we got from the federal government, we were able to create a couple of positions in and around our coaches and interventionists and things like that. So what we started to do is, we understand the value of the coaches. We're seeing that with the data and the progress that our students are making, particular at the younger ages. And we want to make sure that we can preserve some of those positions. So when we take a look at, if you recall, when we started to talk about the capital project, us not getting funding for additional classrooms because the ratios that the state considers that are acceptable, we're very low here in Greenville. Our ratios are at a point where they weren't going to give us additional monies for those. So we recognize that we've had that luxury of having 14, 15 kids in a classroom. So one of the things as we take a look at is, we've 4 sections, 5 sections. What does that mean if we go to, if you take a 5-section class and take it to 4 sections? So we have a retirement. Do we need to replace that retirement? And we can keep that funding in there to save, one the coach's position, some of those things. So those are some of the conversations as we go through this process of looking out past a year or two. How can we save some of the things that we're finding value in? So that is the conversations around some of those things. Question came up about CTE and what is the cost to the district when we are looking at continuing CTE pathways. That's outside of, we just had one approved in November, for an engineering pathway. We're not hiring new teachers for these positions. They're not. They're currently within our curriculum. What it's been is designing the curriculum in such a way that we are able to offer the pathway and get New York State approval. So outside of a few textbooks that we have purchased this year, that's not an increase into the budget at all in regards to offering some of those programs here for our students. But we need to have some other conversations around what are some of those things that we want to take a look at. When we initially put our budget out there, it was with a lot of the wants and needs. We are starting to peck away at getting down to that number that is what we can live with. So at this point, I don't know if we want to open it up to discussion or about different things.
So the sheet that I gave you, the top portion is with the $230,000 capital outlay. The next one down is the $125,000 capital outlay. Because there was a question about the tax levy and tax rate with both scenarios. But keeping the tax levy close to 2.5. So one side is by 0.01% decreases, and one side is by a 0.10% decreases. So this way you can see how much we will have to remove from the budget to get to those thresholds.
So I'll start off. So from a budgetary perspective, I understand that there are contractual obligations. I'll call them obligations. Those are things you just have to do. And then there are the shoulds. And the shoulds are the things that you should do that are appropriate because it's the right thing for education. And then there's the wants, and those I call, in my world, the wish list, something that you would like to have because it's going to enhance the world you're in. So the obligations, you have no choice about it. The shoulds, I think we should do the shoulds when they're appropriate, and I trust your judgment to keep all the shoulds in. And what I heard our superintendent say is that they're balancing out the wants right now with the wish list. So my first observation is that in the adjustments that went from last time to this time, that the need to cut changed immensely in the size. I mean, it was a 289K, now we're down to 68K. So thank you for doing some magic. I had said originally last week, I was looking for 2.5, and with the adjustments, the tax cap now is at 2.51. That's to me the same. So we can certainly go to the cap from my perspective. The levy is going to, if it comes down, which it will, because you need to cut to reach 2.51. I mean, so you got to make some cuts anyways. So if you came from 68 to 70 or 72 and you're cutting, I leave that to your discretion. But I'm comfortable with 68. So reaching the cap is enough for me.
I'll jump in. And first, I agree with Eric. I'm comfortable with getting to the cap. For the amount you've identified as a deficit on the wants, I mean, it makes sense to me anyway to start with the new spending and see what can be pushed off rather than cutting something in the budget, or rather cutting something existing expenditure, position, whatever. I don't remember what other new spending was proposed that would get you to 68. Do you already have some, whether it's new or otherwise? I guess two questions. Do you already have an idea of what those items might be? And if you don't want to, I don't know, I don't know if you want to get out ahead of the discussion you're going to have tomorrow, that's fine.
Yeah, we have some idea. Again, remember when we go back to that preliminary budget, there was a lot of opportunities to take a look at what is going to enhance program, what are we going to do to help kids, you know, help our buildings and grounds, help our transportation, some of those things. So we do have some dollar figures in regards to some of those items as we go through this process to figure out where we want to get to. I appreciate the conversation around, you know, what are we looking to add to the budget? Look there first before something that's already in the budget. And again, I think whatever we decide to do, you know, there's a ripple effect, and we have to have that conversation around what is the ripple effect of removing. You know, one of the things that we talked about that's in the budget already, I'll use this as an example, is after-school bus runs, the late buses. You know, understanding what the ridership is, how is that going to affect some of the services that we provide after school for kids getting tutoring and things like that. So that really has to be a conversation we have in our cabinet meetings to say, okay, what exactly, how are there other ways to get at some of this if we were to go down that road. So taking a look at you know, our clerical folks who, you know, were at one point 12 months and were years ago reduced in force. You know, so is that when we took a look at that and saying, you know, where is that support really needed? Instead of making everything the same, we really took a look at, you know, this is really where we could see an increase in efficiencies if we were to make them 12 months again. So those are the conversations that, you know, we will have to go back and have. The input from the Board of Education is awfully important in regards to areas that we want to take a look at. You know, we've talked about the exercise room and open that to the public. It's something that the board has been interested in doing. You know, we've had conversations about some other things. So those are the things that I think from a board's perspective we want to have some input from you guys on in regards to which direction you would like us to go. Understanding that we will go back and use our group to have that conversation.
Yeah. I think aside from, again, just hesitating because I'm trying to qualify it as, you know, not as close to any of this as y'all are the experts. So taking the opinion for what it is. Other than cutting, or not cutting, but avoiding new spending, try to bridge the gap. I assume that if we're looking at purchasing new equipment versus, you know, potentially not adding somewhat like innate or clerical support, that on a budget perspective, it's a one-to-one, same difference, right? If we're looking 10,000 on equipment, the same as it would be on spending 10,000 for a 0.1 or a 0.2 for position, right? So I assume that it becomes your discussion analysis of which do you need more this year, this coming year, right?
Yeah, I think it's like your household budget, really, is you take a look at, you know, the needs of different things and what can you put off till tomorrow and what do you really think you need to get in now. And it's not an easy conversation. And I think that sometimes it's important for us to be able to take a look at, you know, obviously our programs that we have for students, but we also have to make sure that we are maintaining transportation, buildings and grounds, and those types of things.
Right.
You know, we keep putting some of that stuff off, and there is some sacrifices that we make over in that area in regards to making sure that we've got what we need for our kids and programs. But yeah, that's really where those conversations come down to, is really not analyzing some of those things.
Okay, two final thoughts and I'll pipe down. First, probably goes without saying, but I think the most important thing is there have been some really good investments, I think, in coaches and other efforts try to boost performance that hopefully we'll see good results from over time. And so to me, the most important thing is preserving those investments wherever possible. So cutting outside of that is needed. And then otherwise, I know I had made the comment about the assistant musical director, but I think, as Eric clarified, I missed the point that it was, the position would still be, you still have the person there, it's just a matter of where the money's coming from. And I still think it's a negligible hit to the budget. However, I was more thinking of it in terms of not having the person there for negligible gain towards bridging that gap versus having the person there, just the money coming from somewhere else. So with that, if you think it's better to keep it out of the budget for this year, I think I was more focused on the benefit of having the person there at what seems like a low cost, but that's not the choice.
I think with probably having a moving target with the inflation and trying to come into grips with not only supplies and within a realm that works, I think lowering the tax cap, down to 2.51, which is close in these conditions, I'm comfortable with where we are right now. And I appreciate looking into the small amounts that impact the learning experience or the extracurricular experience for the kids. So I'm glad, but I see some of the cuts that are here seem like we did what's best possible for not only the learning for the children, but also to make sure that we don't take money away from today, and we're going to increase costs due to outlaying maintenance costs in order to keep up. So I'm fine with where we are right now.
I'm on the technology committee, and there's a plan to replace laptops for the teachers. There's a significant outlay of that. I hesitate to even think that we should attack that, so to speak, because it would just suggest that we're pushing it off to next year. And I agree with Dave, next year is going to be any easier than this year. But the reality is, I think you and cabinet ought to have a discussion with Scott and the teachers about whether or not that can be done in phases. Maybe half of it this year, half next year. I have a 2-year-old Chromebook, and I find myself looking at every time I see a new thing come out. I take a look at, what's going on there, bigger and faster. But I don't use it as much as the teachers do, and if they're being compromised in what they want to do with what the equipment they have now, that's one thing. But if we're replacing it because we're in a cycle, that's another. And if we can delay even half of that for a year, we can get that 68,000 in one. It would seem to me in one fell swoop. I don't know how many are we talking about, Scott?
Right now, 168.
150?
168.
158.
68.
168. And I don't know, the one you were looking at and talked about was retail 1,900, probably something less through BOCES, right?
Yeah, we're getting it for 13.
How much? 1,300?
1,300.
1,300. So if we took half of those, there's your 6,800 right there. So, does every teacher need a new laptop? That's my question. And it's nice keep that cycle, and I'm all for it as a member of that committee. I feel like I'm talking two-faced, Scott, sorry about that, okay? But the reality is that's one area where you need to talk to cabinet about.
I sent you a question, Mike, yesterday, and I appreciate your massaging the answer this evening. I will make my response to that and my concern pretty darn clear. I will never vote for the elimination of a position that puts a person in front of students in a classroom. And I will not support it either. I think that's just not something that I find acceptable, especially when we put people in front of us and they talk about the deficit, the learning gap, and all the work they're doing to catch up these kids. I don't really care about the number of kids in a classroom and how it compares to state, because I know that if there's fewer kids in each classroom, kids are going to learn more from a teacher.
Sounds like a mistake to me.
Yeah, again, I think we're not looking to eliminate
Okay.
a position. We're not removing a teacher. We're really looking at resources and how we can best use them. We take a look at small class sizes, and yes, it's easier for classroom management. I think what we have found with our interventionists and our coaches, there is where we're seeing an increase in how kids are being successful. And it's not so much that there's a difference between having 13 kids in a classroom or 18 kids in a classroom. So when we talk about going from 5 sections to 4 sections, that is utilizing a retirement so that we are not laying off or letting someone else go. So yeah, no, I appreciate where you're at.
We have a difference of opinions.
Yeah, and that's fine too. I think that's, I'm not going to, I think all opinions are important, and I think it's a perspective that we have to have. At the end of the day, we have to make decisions that, professionally we feel is the right decisions in regards to how we utilize and approach student improvement and budget. So it's fine. I appreciate that.
Mike, isn't one of the issues that with the coaches and the interventionists, we've changed it to push in, so in fact there are more adults in classrooms now with them, not fewer?
Yes, not on a regular basis, but we are utilizing coaches in the classrooms and interventionists to be able to help support students and teachers.
So, Mike, if I'm following then, if you were to use the retirement to try to capture some savings, that would be much more than 68,000 and change, right?
It would be.
Right, so I mean, I think all else equal, I think I agree with Dave, and that I'd rather not see a reduction of a position. Especially if we're in a position where it's $68,000 is a lot of money, but it seems, what I'm not hearing is that we have to reduce a position in order to get there. If we're in a position where we still had $100,000, $200,000 or $300,000 to bridge, then I think the calculus would be different. My hesitation was just, although I generally agree that especially with around the deficit what we have, I would prefer not to cut a position. I just am not clear enough on how the different pieces fit together. In other words, I'm worried that I'm missing something like was before with the musical director, where the money was going from one pocket to the other, we're still keeping the position. So I don't think we're in a position where I would think we need to consider increasing class size by increasing them or reducing the number of sections, whichever way it goes, in order to save almost $70,000 when there might be other options available to get us to the same place.
So one of the things that I think is important to this conversation is, you know, as we take a look at the way monies were used through COVID to add positions, levels of support, things like that, we knew that at the end of, you know, these grants, those monies were going to go away. And so what we've done over the last year or two, as we take a look at, you know, we're not going to save every position that's been created through grants, but we have taken a lot of time and looked at what are we getting the biggest bang for our buck. So one of the things that we have to be mindful of is, you know, if we don't take a look at a retirement this year, and we really want to value those coaches, next year it may be removing a person when it comes down to a coach, or, you know, do we want to save the coach or do we want to remove it? And so when we take a look at retirements, we're in a position where we are not going to hire someone just to let them go in a year. Because ultimately what will happen is these coaches who are, they have rights to go back into those classrooms. So if we decide that we are going to lose that coach, we are then going to remove a teacher we just hired to allow them to go into that spot that they have rights to. So we really want to be mindful of that process as well.
Thanks, Mike. Clearly it's more complicated than I appreciate.
And again, this is not easy, and I think that, and I appreciate the comment, but it is really a forward-thinking, when we take a look at programming, we take a look at these things. You know, the cabinet spends a lot of time, and this has been on our agenda every Tuesday since last spring, because we have to keep this in our minds moving forward. Is we're not just building a budget for the 23-24 school year. We've got to look out for the 24-25, 25-26 school years as well, and how we want to make sure that we are supporting programs in you know, our schools. So it's really not a one-year look. It has really been, before I even got here, Janet and the team were really taking a look at, okay, how are we building this budget so we are able to, you know, keep a social worker, which we've hired now as a social worker, and we've been able to get that into the general budget, but it all started out of a grant. And we see the effectiveness of this position. Coaches are the same way. We're seeing the effectiveness of what they're doing. So if we want to keep them, we have to be really strategic in the way we look at every retirement and say, is this a way that we can find the best use of resources to provide support for our kids and for our faculty? So it's not a one and done type approach to looking at budget. It's really looking at it through the course of the years. And it's great that the government came out and gave us all this money and grants and stuff. But when you create positions, you have to understand that eventually the community has to absorb that somehow if they find value in those spots. So.
I'll just share that for the coaches, and I think that it is critical. I think that it is something that we do want to keep. I think that we need to look at it in multi-year and kind of be creative that as to what we could do, because if it simply comes down to next year, we won't be in a position to keep them. So, I mean, that is the bottom line. So, I think we have to have some flexibility on it. That's my thought. So kind of netting out that, like, yeah, I'm supporting that to be creative in that. I think the fact that They do go in, they do push in, does assist with the number of students that the teacher is managing, because you have more adults in there, even if they're working in small groups or so forth. So ideal would be that none of this, that we don't have any of these issues, but our reality is we do. And if we do want to keep them, then we cannot wait until next year, because at that point we lose them and then we lose the new hires. So that's the way I'm looking at it.
So the last slide in your presentation is just the dates. April 17th, bring to you a tentative budget for adoption. May 2nd is the budget hearing, and then May 17th is the vote.
So just to clarify, are we looking at having at the next meeting, which is the 13th, a final budget then for approval?
That would be our hope, is to present to the board, not so much for approval, but to bring back to you to say, this is where we're at. We have gotten to that, if it's agreed upon, at 2.51, and give the budget to the Board of Education to consider, and then it won't be adopted until that April 17th meeting.
Correct. So then just going around, if I heard correctly, then everyone is in agreement with that 2.51, is that correct?
As long as it doesn't include a cut in position, as I stated. If it does, I won't support it.
Okay, so,
That's pretty simple.
okay. And everyone else is comfortable with the 2.51, correct?
Well, that's our new tax levy,
Yes.
So it's going to the tax levy. Okay.
that's the cap.
Wouldn't hurt if we came in at 2.47. I mean, depending on what they're looking at for the cuts. But, you know, if it came down lower, but I'll support 2.51.
You know, we have to discuss, I mean, getting it to $68,886, you know, it might be a little bit lower, so the tax levy will move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The actual will be lower.
Yeah. I mean,
No, I know.
I think it's always nice when we can say we are below the tax levy,
Yes, it does.
even if it is by 0.1%. All right, thank you very much. Then I'm going to, on the agenda, move us to our action items. So I need a motion to approve the contract between the Greenville Central School District and Mid-State Industries in the amount of $592,000 for work.
Oh, there's our 68 right there.
Here we go. For work related to the outdoor classroom development and renovation project.
Eric, I need a second.
Second.
Okay, thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve a change order, GC 001 for the outdoor classroom development and renovations project. SED number 19-07-01-04- you highlighted it.
Sorry.
Okay, so, sorry. 04-0-001-032 in the credit amount of $29,800.
Eric, second?
Okay, any discussion?
Rich, is the concrete already in place? Is the concrete already in place or no? That's, okay.
This is for color and stamping, right?
And all the other things that are.
So we're just going with normal, with plain concrete? Okay, for sittings. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I need a motion to approve the change order CG 002 for outdoor classroom development and renovations project, MS SED 19-07-01-04-0-008-027 in the credit amount of $23,000.
Eric, can I get a second? Duncan, thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Dave? Yeah, thank you.
The closed and open forum, please note the same guidelines apply as stated during the first open forum. Is there anyone that would like to speak? Do we have any emails?
No, we do not.
Okay, then I'm going to move us down, and I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Duncan and Jim.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.